Good morning, people. Good morning, good morning, good morning. I hope that everybody is doing okay. We're doing here is setting up the stream. I hope that I've caught some people live. If not, that's okay. This will be broadcast later on. You can come in and enjoy what we have to talk about today. I have this sample of music going in the background just to kind of guide us into this. So this is really going to be a chance for you and us, my co-host or my guest today, will be discussing some personal energies and some things, to be honest, that I'm not even aware of. So I won't speak too much to these topics, but I will allow him to fill in these gaps, both in my life, because I'm sure I need some of it, and hopefully it inspires others to research or to read into some of these topics as well. And I find them fascinating and increasingly more important areas of discussion as we navigate through tough times, through negativities, through interesting sort of developments that have happened in the world. And if my friend is ready, I would like to bring him into the chat here. Everybody say hello to my friend Jazz.
Hello, thanks for having me on.
How are you, man?
I'm doing all right. I
Good.
actually slept in this morning, so that was a nice, rare experience to have.
To sleep in, yeah.
Yeah. I'm like, even on my natural eternal clock, I'm up by 7, the very latest. So waking up at 8 a.m., I was like, oh wow, this is what it is to be sleeping in.
Yeah.
and it's also funny because back in my 20s when I was trying to live that artist lifestyle and partying a lot, I would be going to bed at like 8 a.m. or 7 a.m. So now that I go to bed at a reasonable time and waking up at a reasonable time, it's just like, wow, I've changed.
Whatever we've decided is reasonable at a certain point in our lives, right?
Oh well, yeah. I'm
That
just
scale
glad.
is always personally applied. It's not objectively applied, right?
Well,
Reasonable is whatever this tells us.
oh, well, yeah, and I mean that just gets into the whole aspect of um instead of judging ourselves against someone else, it's eternal. It's us versus us, like
Yes.
self versus self, right? So yeah, I guess I'll start on how I got back into this
Yeah, sure.
line of work. I think that's a great starting. When I was 16, I started, my cousin Nicole, or Coco as she's known in the scene in Windsor, started getting me to go to yoga classes of hers that she teaches and things like that, and really started getting in touch with that, and then lost in my 20s that connection because I was placating I need to suffer for my art in order to create genuine art, and I got to party because that's just part of the lifestyle.
Now's the time.
Oh fuck. So at 27, I guess, oops, I'll watch my language because we are live.
Doesn't matter.
Um,
Everything that I have said previous to this, if you're not familiar with my back library, my audience or whomever knows that should know that this channel doesn't censor really anything. Expression of human elements and factors, whatever it feels like, go with it. I think that's permissible.
Okay, cool. So at 27, I was diagnosed with type 1 diabetes. And that was the wake up call, the universe being like, oh, you don't want to listen to our little signs. All right, we're going to smack you in the face and be like, get it now, B?
Yeah.
Okay.
Isn't that true?
Okay. So, I mean, that first 2 years of that diagnosis, that just took me down so many pegs, and essentially unlearned all the habits and the patterns and ideologies that I thought I was supposed to have as an artist, and letting that go and finally having that room to grow. So then
Mhm.
in my journey, I started, I was like just over 200 pounds when I started, with the diagnosis, and then with training to do a show for a year, doing aerial silk, clown, and a dance show. It was the first time, like, I played hockey, I was on the wrestling team and stuff. Doing aerial silks was the only time that I had a six pack. um, and so through that, I went from just over 200 pounds to 145 pounds.
Oh wow.
And a lot of friends started noticing. So then after the tour, I was like, okay, now what the heck do I do? So in that, people started taking notice and started asking me tips. And at that time, I was slowly getting out of the entertainment industry because I did get burnt out from the tour. Like, I had a lot of fun, but I was burnt out.
Yeah.
So um, yeah, moved to Edmonton, tried to like make money on the rigs so that I could go out and tour again, although that didn't work out. And that's a whole other. But yeah, so then in that process, I was working in kitchens and being a server, to make money and stuff like that. And I was just like, okay, I need out of this, because as a cook, you start getting more jaded because of the unnecessary stress. And
Yep.
then, drinking on the job, like, oh, I'll just buy a 26er of vodka and like finish it halfway through the shift and be kind of like,
The
I
usual
need
sort of
half
like
in the bank.
mechanisms or whatever's normal for the atmosphere or
Yeah.
yeah.
So once then I was like, okay, I need out. And having all these people ask me, I got inspired to get into personal training. So I actually
Okay.
did second careers. I got like that government funding to
Yep.
do
It's a great idea. Yep.
fitness and health promotion. And from there, I got into, so I'm like certified with CanFit. So I'm like a certified trainer and stuff. And then I moved back to Windsor. And then that, was working at a gym. That first one didn't work that long. Corporate gyms just and I are just no.
Yeah.
Um,
Certain structures, right? You got to find your place in things, and yeah, I get that.
yeah,
I get that
and
very well.
so then I ended up finding another gym that I worked at, and there I started getting training for like FST. FST is fascial stretch therapy. So
Okay.
what it is manipulating the range of motion of your joints.
Mhm.
And so the fascia are kind of the communication centers throughout your body. So they're in between where the tendons and the muscles meet at the joint. There's a lot of nerve endings and communication centers that are in there. So then when those get bunched up, then there's a miscommunication,
Oh,
or
okay.
not as an effective communication method going on, because it has to work through that whole big bump and
Okay.
knot, or whatever you want to call it.
Interesting.
Um, yeah. So then through that, like, started going more into that, getting away from the training, but working more on mobility. And then now I do Reiki. I'm a level 3 master. And I do the stretching, the mobility.
Mhm.
So the whole philosophy behind it is that I do the mobility stuff first, so that your body is going to be running as effectively as possible. So then when I'm bringing in this universal life force, that's what Reiki is.
Yep.
The name translates into universal life force, that your body can sustain that energy for longer periods of time.
Oh, it makes sense. That's like with any I always come to a point of relating uh the human body like a bio machine, and anything else I know that's a machine, whether it's like a car or computer or anything that's like mechanical and electrical, which is essentially what I like as a materialist side of things. I look at the body like it's got matter and it functions together in a mechanical way with signals that are sent either chemically or electrically. So anything that's got a mix of these processes as a machine, like a computer, or like, so clean, when you say the fascia and the bundles and things, I think about either like a um, a dirty muffler, for instance, right? So a muffler will will collect dirt and grime, and over time it will resist airflow from the motor, and the motor can't flow or breathe properly unless these channels are cleared. And when it is, then you have a higher level performance from that instance. Same thing with computers. If it has to run around all over the place finding data on a disk, and you don't defrag or organize correctly, then it has to work harder to do the same work.
Oh, yeah, exactly.
In my mind, that's how I relate these terms.
Yeah. And I mean, yeah, it's I use the car reference as well, especially living in Windsor, Ontario,
Of
where
course.
it's an automotive city. So
Yeah.
like how to reach out to these people is using car analogies, because like they're like, oh, I get that because I work into an assembly line. I don't know why they had the voice. I just
Okay.
yeah.
That's to me, that's like a factor of environmental factors cueing a type of thing, right? So like I get that too. I'll have like an accent, or I'll come from a certain place. I'm like, wait a second, why am I doing? Why did I just go to this place? It's like it's been imprinted on my mind, and that's how it develops. So like I feel like that's like an automatic sort of thing that gets applied to expression through, like, it's environmental, right?
Well, yeah, and I mean, you want to make it relatable and whatnot. So yeah, like using analogies and stuff like that is going to help drive that idea that you're trying to portray. So
Nice. You use the word drive, and we were talking about cars. I like where
well,
you're going with this.
yeah, see? I'm not just a pretty face.
Well, I don't know. I don't see much the rest of you today.
Hey, I kind of cleaned up. Like, geez, I put on a nice shirt. Like,
That's all right. I feel where you're coming from, and that's what's important here is the where we're coming from, and more than that, I guess, how these things align and where we're going.
yeah. So yeah, like this is one of the things that always gets me. So I don't know if you've ever heard of the word sedentary lifestyle. So
No.
okay, so in the health and wellness community, a sedentary lifestyle is someone that doesn't really work out, might not eat the healthiest, probably sits and watches a lot of TV or at their desk, sitting a lot. And the Canadian like recommendation of being and the difference between being a sedentary lifestyle and an active lifestyle is 30 minutes a day.
Oh, okay. So 30 minutes of activity or sustained activity? Okay.
Yep. Yeah, and the idea is to get the blood pumping, or sorry, let me rephrase that. Excuse me, the heart pumping more effectively. Like
Okay.
that's
So
why
heart
we do the
activity,
workouts,
yeah.
is so that again, you know, like tuning a fine car or like fine tuning a car, you are essentially trying to keep everything running smoothly. So when a car sits, especially, you know, right now in the wintertime, it might be a little bit harder to start up.
Mhm.
Same thing by you sitting all the time, and especially with the sitting and gravity, that your legs are dangling. Well, things can like the blood flow can easily go down because of gravity, but trying to get back up can be a little bit more difficult, which is why you have, you know, some older people or especially type 2 diabetics that have to get gangrene and they have to get amputated. Well, if they're sitting
So if you have
a lot, right, then they're not effectively moving that blood around so that your body is running like an effective machine,
Mhm.
or what I like to joke about calling it a meat suit. Well, sorry, let me rephrase that. A third dimensional meat suit.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. I feel where you're coming from there. I've heard it referred to in some like pop culture shows where I think Star Trek, there was an episode where one of the aliens calls them ugly flesh bags of mostly water.
Yes. Yeah.
Which is
And I
true.
laugh at that. Yeah.
I'm not gonna deny that.
Well, I mean, again, in an ideal body, your body's almost like 65-70% of water.
It is, yeah.
Yeah. But I mean,
So,
some people
mostly
don't
water.
drink a lot of water, and then that can get into a whole other topic. And I'm trying to focus in on the mobility and then mindset.
We'll come back. I'll make some notes.
Yeah. So why I like linking the mobility and the mindset together when I talk about these is that, and you get the body moving, which also helps the mind.
Right.
The mind is what is like our thoughts will project our reality. So if you've ever heard of things like law of attraction or law of abundance, that gets into like what we focus on, we will give power to. Then by giving it that power, it will then attract into our life.
Right.
Or crap, I had a good thing in my head and then I just lost it. So like crap.
That train of thought just took a sidestep.
It was like, no, you're not going to bring it up.
No, we're not ready yet.
Yeah.
These pipes are being used for other things right now. Like, how early in the morning is it, and what didn't I do, and how our mind works. Right, our mind is not always linear. That's what it is.
Well, there's consistent thoughts coming in, and right. I guess so. Like the importance of meditation is to help calm the mind, and it's not to like stop your mind from thinking, because that's almost impossible, because then you get into like ego versus higher self, and so ego, okay, what happens with that is we have things that happen when we're 5 years old, 6, 7, like in our formative years. So let's say birth to like 16 years old. Okay, there can be a lot of traumatic events that could possibly happen there. And so what happens is the ego will try and keep us safe and keep us in the ball of what we know.
Right, comfort, like it's a comfort zone manager. Yes. Well, okay.
So then what starts to happen is that you will start attracting things in your life to have ego be right. Like perfect example is, I don't trust this person, and therefore, like, then there's a situation where it comes up and there's like, maybe they did a little white lie. And you're like, so ego's like, see, I told you, he's gonna lie to you. Like, don't trust everyone. Yeah. And it will keep you in that bubble of what we know. And it's so then, especially when you're starting out your spiritual journey, this analogy was used, and I love it, so I'm gonna use it right now. It's almost similar to like, as you're a kid, that first time that you're on a diving board, gonna jump into the water, but like there's that hesitancy, there's that like, I'm unsure. So ego will then be like, okay, well, that's okay, we don't have to go, you can stay within this comfort. Whereas your higher self is like, all right, let's do this, and we'll jump and take that leap of faith. And once you take that leap of faith, you realize you start realizing that, oh wait, my thoughts are projecting my reality. They're also trying to have that confirmation bias
Mhm.
that what I believe I'm going to attract in the world in order to confirm these biases that I have.
Right. Right.
So it's awareness, I would say, is probably the first and biggest step for self growth, is being aware of the patterns that you have created to keep you safe and in ego, instead of connected to the universe and connected to your higher self.
Right.
Now, I personally use universe. I don't use God or anything like that.
So could we say that maybe that terminology is a representation either by a word to, and I always thought that maybe God was a way for humans to just personify something they didn't understand. They gave it a title and a generalized sort of entity figure, and universe is also the same thing. It's largely something we don't understand. As far as dark matter is concerned, it's 95% whoop, we don't know. So universe and God, can we say that it's interchangeably to represent kind of the same thing?
Yep. Yeah.
Okay.
Exactly. So I'll kind of flip back and forth, because some people might resonate with God
Yeah.
more, some people
Yes,
might
exactly. I
resonate with
just want to make
universe.
it clear that we in discussion format or whatever, what we're trying to do here is relate one aspect of the greater unknown
Yeah.
to represent or tie in with something that is more in discussion. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
Now, I mean, I'll do a brief little. So what I feel I've found through, now again, this could get into confirmation bias and whatnot, but this
Sure.
is some of the things that I've come across that like seems legit. So I feel that it was just like, if we get into dimensions, right? So we currently live in a third dimension, then there's fourth dimension, fifth, sixth, and so on. What I feel and what I've seen through different programs, writing, readings of books and things like that, is that what we consider God here isn't actually God. They're just higher dimensional beings that were like, let's do some experiment on monkeys and like make different. Oh, here's a human. Now we're gonna have them enslaved and build stuff for us. But then like we're gonna, after we'll let them go, maybe kill them off. That because then you're getting in the myth lore of the Anunnaki, which are the lizard people.
Wow.
And essentially they're like the ones that created us. Then there is the two brothers that fought. One wanted to give freedom to humans. The other one wanted to keep us as slaves. Um, in the Christian Bible, Abel and Cain is
Right.
essentially
That's where I
a
went because that's what
story.
I'm familiar. Yeah.
Yeah, is a story that is like linked to that. Um, so yeah, so like, to me that makes a lot of sense, that like, okay, there's some higher dimensional beings or higher intelligent forms of life that were like, we don't want to do the work ourselves, so let's let's create something else in order for us to get this work done.
Mm-hmm.
And then they didn't know what to do with us, and then it caused a war. And then it's like, okay, so even in higher dimensionals, there's always this sense of war, and I'm like, okay, why? Is it just because of having a negative and a positive force that like there's the inevitability of clashing against it instead of working together? And you're just like, oh, why did I go down this rabbit hole?
It sounds like there's a lot going on there. I mean, even with the renaming and reassigning of roles, say like if it isn't this known plane or like the books we have, the characters are represented. It seems like the same themes translate all the way up to even these other dimensions. How is that? How to me that begs a question. It raises a question to me that how the same sort of humanized themes transcend the dimensions into figures that we have no idea about. Is that personifying them? Is that our fault? Or is it a fact of their dimensional character, objective of us? That's what my philosophy mind asks, because it seems so very familiar humanly. But
Yeah,
what, the same question you asked, how is this like this idea of war in both stories, both regions of energies? What's going on there?
yeah. Or like, is it so then therefore humanity has picked up these traits because of their own follies as a species?
Right.
So then we, that, and this kind of leads into like the whole generational curse thing
Yeah.
where, like, especially especially as males, when the last 40-50 years has been focused on, oh, toxic masculinity. Okay, cool. So we don't want to be that, but we don't talk about, okay, well, what is positive masculinity then?
Right.
So then we can start working towards that aspect and better ourselves. But because we're in this like stagnant moment where like, well, we don't want to be this, but we don't know what to work towards, you're still going to end up passing or incorporating some of these toxic masculinity traits without even knowing it. You could be like, oh, I don't want to be like that, but it still kind of seeps in because it's, again, in that ball of what we know.
Yeah. Yeah. That masculinity thing is, it has been a very relevant topic, and there's been a lot of like social reversals and self-accounting, and what my mom has imparted to me as a perspective is she feels like, and has been described as a pendulum from one social or one center of power socially, or a norm, a pendulum swinging to another side instead of it being balanced. It's a pendulum swinging from one end to another. So
Oh,
I find that interesting, and maybe, I mean, I don't I don't know that balance is ever reached like right away. Like when you're made aware of something and you're like, oh, I have to balance this out. Even when I'm trying to level my table, I don't get it right the first time. That the little air pocket goes back and forth a couple times, and I have to like adjust the feet and adjust the feet and adjust the feet, and then eventually it balances out. I thought this idea of pendulum swinging from one center of focus or power or perspective to the other side, be it from male to female if we're going to use sex, or from men to women if we're going to use genders, now that balancing is starting to see all this kinds of like fracturing and description and expression in the middle. So to me, it seems like this balancing is actually going through multiple iterations all at the same time, while dealing with like social construct and the idea of power.
yeah.
To me, that's
Um,
what it reflects like.
I mean, you're not wrong,
Okay.
and I mean, I I might get ridiculed for this next statement, but like we're in a day and age where toxic femininity is a thing now.
Oh, for sure, I agree with that. I'm gonna go in. I'm gonna burn with you on this one. Cheers.
Cheers. And it's now I do have some empathy because when you've been oppressed for generations and
Yes.
generations, and you're like, oh, I have freedom. Now I can take all that rage out and that generational rage that has been passed on to me, and I'm going to take it out on the man now. Even though, like, I feel like our generation was like that first male generation where we started listening to our mothers complaining about our fathers and how either they weren't there or they're drunk fucktards. And we're like, okay. So then we start listening and adapting and thinking like, okay, so women want more of this. And then women are because of the rage and the anger and allowing that to take front, is that they're taking it out on us. And it's just like, well, we're trying to help solve these issues and this gap between the genders.
Yeah.
And you want to shit on us? Like, shit on our fathers or our grandfathers. Like, don't take it out
Yes.
on us
Yeah.
because we're trying to make a difference. And
Yeah.
and I get it, but then it's again that circle of what we know and keeping into that. And I think right now, like, we are in a beautiful time where people are starting to realize these things, and why we kind of feel very chaotic right now, because everything is essentially being upheaved, and we're looking at be like, okay, this was a good positive about society, this isn't, so we're trying to take it of what is
Yes.
good and for the greater good. And this is why we're in this very chaotic state. Like, I feel the next 5 to 10 years are gonna feel really chaotic because there's a big upheaval. The
Yes. Yeah.
planet itself is raising its frequency. Now, this might be a little bit off, like for some people, or not conventional, but this whole idea of the apocalypse and ascension and stuff like that, from what I have gathered from all the sources and stuff like that, this is kind of what I believe, is that we're as a solar system are getting ready to ascend from third to fifth dimension. This is
Okay.
part of the pattern or the sacred geometry of the universe, is that
Right.
after a certain point it ascends. So
Right.
right now there's people like myself who are healers and have past lives of healing modalities and stuff. We're clearing out so that we can create these new programming for people. So when all like the dust settles, then we're like, okay, now let's try these methods, getting back into a matriotic instead of a patriotic system. So feminine, and realizing that in an ideal state, you are neutral or balanced.
Right.
So it's not about going from all the way negative to now being all the way positive. And then if you're negative, then you like, oh, I feel bad because I was negative at one point. No,
Right.
it's the balance. So what I created this meme, and I loved it, and I was like, okay, so January 1st I sent it out to a bunch of people as a good way to start 2022.
Right.
And it's having the playfulness of Deadpool but the inner calmness of Bob Ross. That's balance. Now, I did not.
I'm picturing both of them having a conversation right now, and it's already hilarious. That's a great duo of people. Amazing.
Right, and it's an extreme because like Deadpool can represent our shadow self, right, which can be very dark and whatever, but like also inner child a little bit as well. And then you have Bob Ross, which is like your higher self, being connected to nature, being connected with self, being self-aware, and having that balance of both. It's when that negative thoughts comes in, be like, don't feel guilty, just
Right.
acknowledge that is there, and then let it go, because
Right.
then by letting it go, you're not giving it that power. And that's the difference. It's giving it power or not giving it power.
Right. So
And
when these things enter your mind, which we've established is basically impossible, our minds are like a radio antenna.
Yeah.
It will just bring in everything. And it's more about I guess, would you say it's like a practice tuning? So we can tune in on either if it's positive, negative, we take it in, and then if we decide to like send it to the next step, then it gets the attention. So that's where this energy comes from. So it's
Yep.
like you have to practice this tuning or filtering of like what you're allowing in and what you're going to so if you're open to everything, the attraction comes with what you dial in. Say like if I look up kitten videos on YouTube, what they call the algorithm will say, hey, this guy's been picking kitten videos. Let's send him more kitten videos. So I'm gonna.
Sorry, when you say like the algorithm, it's just like, ooh, gotta watch out for that algorithm.
Yeah, it's not because that's been personified as a negative thing because of what people look for all the time, and this is where I want to take that step back and reveal, like in our minds, it works the same way. I want to be able to draw the parallel to a degree.
Yeah.
That what we tune into and what we allow into our lives works like an algorithm does for search engines. So if all you see is bad news, you're looking for crisis, you're looking for breaking news, you're looking for anything that scares you, then you're going to get constant news of things that are going to scare you. So the news starts to look like a horror story and that everything is falling apart. But that's only because you started looking for it in the first place. So the same, like your ego sort of circle of like feedback loop is saying, oh, I feel suspicious, and then something happens, you're like, oh, see, that's suspicious. So the algorithm works the same way, like life tuning. And if you tune into what scares you, you're going to constantly see things that scare you, because that's the pathway that you've reinforced.
Oh, 100%. And then that gets into what I was saying earlier about like the whole confirmation bias kind of thing. And like your reality will be now confirming these thoughts that you've given power to.
Okay. So I just wanted to make that link in like a practical, everyday way with these energy levels we're talking about here.
So another way to look at it is from a nervous system. So like a physiological human, like kinetics aspect.
Okay.
So you've heard of the sympathetic and parasympathetic nervous systems, right?
Like your breathing versus your heartbeat.
I
got just those two. That's all I know.
So it's more of like, so the sympathetic nervous system is your fight or flight. Your parasympathetic is your rest and digest.
Okay.
So like when you're doing a meditation or whatnot, like you're more in a parasympathetic nervous system. When you're about to write a test or you're driving, you're more likely in a fight or flight. Okay. Mm-hmm. So when you're in a fight or flight, is what's happening is that the body is releasing the stress hormone cortisol to block off any non-essential organs or functions in the body. So you're literally functioning at a basic level. Uh-huh. Whereas when you're in a parasympathetic, that's where you can start unlocking your self-healing. You're more calm. Your blood pressure and that is going to be in normal range. Sometimes can even go like lower because of the state that you're in.
Right.
So another way for people to think about it: sympathetic, stress; parasympathetic, peaceful.
Okay.
Yeah, it took me a while to learn, and then one day I'm like studying, and then that came up, and I'm like, finally!
Moments of epiphany, yeah.
Yeah. Almost felt like screaming out, Adrian!
Yeah. Nice. Those moments where things just click, and you get. That's it's hard to describe even for myself. I just find that like sometimes these factors exist in life. We've been told this and we've been told this and we've been through this area, and like there's sometimes that I've like been to areas like physically, and someone had told me something about an area at one time, and then I happened to walk by it like years later, and I look around and I'm like, oh shit, this is what they were talking about. Like, I'm in that place now. I mean, how long I've lived in the city or been there before, and I just never like looked at a certain angle, or just things just happen to click into place is what I feel like. And then when it does, it's like your mind is like slipping into a gear through like a clutch mechanism, right? And it just catches and you're like, fuck, now I'm in this second, third gear thing. Like, let's go.
Well, yeah, and I mean, it depends on how much clearing you've done on yourself in order to be aware. Like, and I was victim to it as well as the whole like, oh, why me? It's like, so a victim mentality, right?
Right, victim mentality.
So getting back in, when I was diagnosed with as a type 1. diabetic, where I was like, oh, why me? I thought I took care of myself, like, and all this stuff. Like, why do I? And then that placates a whole other thing. Whereas then you're gonna have other things coming into your life to placate that victim mentality.
Yes, that is
Once
true.
once I let go of the why me and realize, you're like, oh, I needed the fucking wake up call because I was not on the path that I came down here for, and I was being self destructive, and I needed that wake up call from
Right.
the universe or God, and to get back on my path. And this is the other thing, like, the Lord works in mysterious ways. No, they're subtle, and if we're not tuned in to that frequency, we're not going to get the message until they take a big fucking sledgehammer and be like, oh no, you don't want to listen? Boop.
Ding.
There
Yeah.
you go. Now you going to listen, bitch.
Yeah. When you come to this, like, it reminds me of that movie Day the Earth Stood Still. Well,
Yeah.
the Keanu Reeves one's the one that I know, and
Yeah.
in the movie they bring up this discussion about he was sent to basically cleanse the earth of human beings because you had your shot, too late, goodbye. And then he meets like a sociologist sort of professor who describes the situation, and then, spoiler alert, by the way, if you haven't seen this movie, I'm going to give this whole thing away right now. They get to this point of discussion where the professor talks about human beings making changes as a species when they reach a precipice of survival. They only make decisions on the very edge of what they can get away with, and then the change starts to happen. So he
Yeah.
describes it as a precipice where you're pushed to like rock bottom, or you know what I mean, like you're at your extreme limits, and then like why ego, I would say that ego is so strong, or our cycle of like self-reinforcement or self feedback loop of comfort is so strong up until it breaks all of its boundaries, and it's either you need to change now or you are going to end.
Yeah. I mean, that's pretty well put together. Like, I mean, it's, and yeah, it's an unfortunate reality, I feel, for us on Earth, is that we learn our greatest lessons in the darkest of times. It's like,
Wow.
you have to go through that oh, you don't want to listen? And again, that's the other thing, is like, the universe is giving you subtle hints, but you're not tuned into it. So then it needs this drastic moment, like
Right.
the equivalent of a supernova or something like that,
Well, we
right?
just had one of those, so
Yeah, I know. See,
time to wake up and be
Yeah,
like, look up, please. Don't follow the movie suggestion. Please look up.
oh man, it's funny. Like, again, that's like another movie where people are so divided on,
Of
and they
course.
either really love it or really hate it.
Yeah.
I loved it, and I love the ending too. Like, everyone's ripping on it, and I'm just like, that's in Hollywood, it would have been that nice ending where everything works out, and it's just
Someone
like,
survived and blah blah. Yeah, no,
yeah,
not
yeah,
this time.
yeah. You're like, no, we're gonna flip that script, and I
No.
think it's needed because especially in a day and age where we're so inundated with this social media and personas and stuff like that, that it's nice to like give that different an ending. Be like, no, if we don't smarten our fucking selves up,
Yeah,
it's gonna get even worse. And so
that's one of those hints you're talking about. Like,
yeah,
this is a director and a writer and a group of people, and there are people in the world who have been ringing that bell for everybody else for a long time. Like, let's not act surprised when this stuff happens. That's what always shocks me. When people are like, oh, really? This happened? And be like, what are you talking about, really? Like, how
Yeah.
can you be surprised? This has been predicted for many years by people who study it. You just weren't listening. That's two different states of mind. There's one that's open, one that's listening,
yeah,
and one that's comfortable but ignorant. So, like, when you act surprised, that's not anybody else's fault. That's your fault. You could have seen it coming if you
Yeah.
were tuned in. Like maybe you don't like talk radio. Maybe talk radio is really boring. You like listening to sports and being entertained. Like Howard Stern's got a lot of really funny shit to say. Let's
Oh,
listen to him every day. But he's not telling you about the highway being jammed up. So if you would stop listening to Howard and listen to talk radio, maybe you would have knew the highway was jammed. So when you get to the highway, it's not a fucking surprise.
well, I mean, this is also like getting into like, so Joe Rogan, right? Like a lot of people
And
kind of
everybody
hate on
loves
him.
shitting on Joe because he's like, oh, he's such a meathead. What does he
No.
know?
He's an intelligent motherfucker. Well, okay, I don't know if he fucks mothers, but like, anyway, I digress.
He's married, he's got kids, that counts.
Yeah. So, but he's a catalyst.
Sorry,
Like,
Joe.
he's a catalyst for like bringing this knowledge, because if you look at some of his guests, he is simply using his name to be able to bring in these people and bring awareness to this. Like, and yeah, like Howard Stern is entertaining,
Yes.
but he's not pushing the envelope like Joe Rogan is.
Yeah.
And that's why like there's a bit more respect for Joe Rogan than Stern, not like dismissing Stern at all, right? Because he has his own like thing as well and whatnot, right? They're just two different facets.
Yeah. Well, there's your balance. That's I'm going to inject that as like a balance. I appreciate when Howard Stern in his movie made a girl go like, you know, made a woman move to orgasm using a speaker. That touched my personal choices in life a little bit too well, but it reinforces my entertainment comfort ego side.
Yeah.
Whereas the uncomfortable topics that like Rogan's guests bring to the table is the uncomfortable sort of awareness side. So that's the dichotomy there that I find that one is being entertaining and comforting and the other one's being informative, and they're both relevant if they're balanced.
Well, I mean, actually, so I just kind of thought of this yesterday, and feel it's relevant right now. So like we're talking about movies and stuff like that. Like there's so much disclosure in movies these days that like people don't really clue into that. Like, perfect example, Marvel movies. Specifically, let's get just Winter Soldier.
Okay.
Winter Soldier was actually disclosing so much about like the super soldier programs that have been going on for like decades now. And the whole like MK Ultra kind of thing, like it was a mixture of both of those. And then like, so I was watching Peacemaker yesterday, which is like
I've seen it.
So it's like the new TV show that's going out. There's 3 episodes and stuff like that. And spoilers. There's this whole thing about the Butterfly Project, and it's butterflies taking over people. And then I'm like, wait, what the fuck? I'm like, because in Suicide Squad 2, it was Starro, and Starro is all about taking over people. And I'm just like, this is where I feel like DC and Marvel are kind of different, whereas like DC's kind of getting into maybe propaganda and fear mongering, whereas like the MCU, Marvel is disclosing things like Infinity Wars, the fact that like there's aliens and things like that. Like I feel that's part of the disclosure timeline and letting us know. Right.
Well, the Pentagon said there's real aliens, but nobody cared because they were too busy fighting
with COVID. And yeah,
exactly. Everybody's like, hide behind a mask. You know, I actually thought the other day that it's hilarious that we got this 5G antenna and facial recognition tracking and all that stuff. And then all of a sudden the government started telling everybody to cover their face. It's like maybe they're trying to hide the American and North American populations from China. That's ridiculous. I don't believe that. I'm not going against China. I'm just saying, I just thought that putting 2 factors together, my mind went, well, you came out with a smartphone that had facial recognition designed specifically to unlock your phone. And then like the very next fucking year, you're like, put a mask on. I'm like, what happens to the facial recognition?
Yeah.
It happened in the same time. I was like, that's weird.
But then again, in North America, we're placated with being divided against Russia and China. But in like some spiritual realms, they're actually saying that China and Russia are trying to help us out and free us. So it's like, who do you believe at this point, right? And then
it also depends on what kind of real facts you have about how this is achieved. I mean, I could be like the very Darwinist, Nietzschean kind of person and be like, well, if you can't survive, then you didn't deserve to be here.
Yeah.
But
fuck
that's
Darwin.
Very harsh. That's not very balanced. If an ego is behind the agenda, then the ego's wrong. It doesn't matter how the agenda plays out. If an ego is there pushing it, it's wrong. It won't be correct because it's not balanced, or it doesn't meet the balanced nature of what our existence is supposed to be like. At least from what I'm getting from these energies and these studies and that kind of thing, it doesn't sound like that's the way that it plays out. If an ego's driving it, then that driver, it doesn't have the skills.
Oh, and then like this opens up the whole spiritual ego. Like these people are saying, these holistic spiritual people, but then and I love using this. It's the difference between like, oh my God, I can't believe you eat meat. Like, they have souls, and like, how could you? You are so like, I can't even right now because like, compared to like, there's so much ego saturated in that and judgment. Where for me personally, I'm like, hey, I decided to eat vegetarian. I saw this documentary thing that was, talking about how meat can actually affect your glucose levels, so your blood sugar levels. So I tried it out. I feel a lot better. My blood sugar is a lot more regulated. So that's why I chose to eat vegetarian. But if you want to eat meat, then like, I don't give a fuck. Like that's on you. Like, I'm not here to judge. I'm here doing what I feel is best for my body, right? And what's best for mine isn't going to necessarily be best for you. And again, that judgment of oh, I can't believe you eat meat, like, causes a divide. Then these people that we're trying to reach out to help and like guide into a more spiritual, healthier realm, like holistic realm, you're cutting them off because, and this is the same with relationships. You start on that attack, and then that other person's going to get really defensive and put up their walls, and then the communication is going to be lacking because it's in a selective hearing, because again, you're letting ego take reign, and have that confirmation bias. You're like, oh, that's against mine, so I'm not going to listen because meh. Right? Whereas like, just having an open communication with someone, whether it be about how you eat in your lifestyle or in an argument with a relationship, by being open and watching your tone and not having that aggressive tone, can keep those windows open, and you can listen to the person, not just hear the person.
Right. Big difference. I bring up that in my own personal sort of like audio thing, where it's like one thing to hear what's going on, and it's an entirely different practice to listen to what's happening. Yeah, totally different. But yes, and I see that in discussion and points of view, is if people are approaching any topic that are already biased, they're approaching with their filter already in place, whatever is being said on the other side, almost immediately or without any intellectual process at all, being filtered out or blocked. So they're not really listening to the other discussion. They're not open to understand what the other side is talking about. They're just I have what I have personally decided, and what is going on outside of my personal protected bubble is just noise and doesn't matter, which is, you can't have somebody say, "Oh, I'm an open person, I'm not judgmental," but then approach a conversation with that filter in place. Those are two completely different states of being. You can't do that. That's hypocritical.
Yeah.
It's ignorant to the fact that you're hypocritical, because you can't be even self-aware to know how you're approaching that. So being open to discussion, to just listen to the other side and allow it to digest. Like,
Yeah,
right?
100%. And that's why I was laughing, because like you end up, you get into that vicious cycle, and you're like, oh, because I'm spiritual, I'm automatically right. And it's like, no, it's not about being right or wrong. And again, society programming is, oh, I'm better than you, or and things like that.
Yes, yeah.
And the
There's
divide.
a lot of those kinds of reinforcing mechanisms,
Yeah.
because a lot of, like, we were talking about we touched on a little bit earlier, like the division in people socially and or I would say economically works really, really well, because competition is what really drives business. You want to
Yeah.
have competitive pricing, competitive features, competitor offerings. You have this moving of back and forth. So like that's a programmed state of mind that we can apply to like everything. It's
Yeah.
programmed. It's environmentally there because it facilitates some other type of agenda. Doesn't mean it's healthy for us in everything we do. So being divided like that is actually probably hurting the effort. We're not allowing everything to kind of come in and take its place and see where it fits. We're just immediately filtering it out.
Oh, 100%. And then again, this is what I feel it's purposely designed that way.
Right.
Because the more that we're divided with each other, the less likely we'll unite and stand together.
Right.
And the powers that be, knowing how powerful we can be, that they're doing what they can to keep ensuring that we're divided. Like,
Right.
I mean, look at the huge divide we have right now between vaxxed and unvaxxed. And
and what gets me about that is there's two sides to this. And I'm going to say, because I'll admit, full disclosure, that I got the two vaccines because I was concerned about how I have a pattern recognition about the government and how, I'm going to say, like, messed up they can be. And when they were talking about passports to allow certain permissions or privileges, I thought, well, I'm in this healthy category against the data worldwide, that if I didn't get it, there's a chance that I would get sick and get immune. That's fine. But if I got the vaccine and or sick, then I could handle whatever the vaccine has been doing as like health side effects. And like with anything, if you take too much Tylenol, you can get sick too.
Well, yeah.
So I was in this middle group and decided, okay, I'm going to get this, even though I don't really agree with them forcing people to. And I'm going to get it because I don't want their agenda stopping me from traveling if an opportunity comes up. And that was the decision. It wasn't medical.
Yeah.
This is where I want to go with the topic, is the decisions and the mandates and the policies don't sound like they're based on medical reasoning, because the medical data doesn't all reflect the agenda. It doesn't all make sense medically from what I've seen. Politically, it makes sense, but to what end is what I'm really looking at. So you have the medical side and you have the political side. So there's almost like four groups of people there. You've got health, and then the left and right, and then you've got political left and right. And then you've probably got a fifth version in the middle. So now you've got 5 subdivisions in one topic.
Yeah. Yeah. So I got the first 2 shots. Again, partly was because of the aspects of wanting to travel. The other thing was medical for me. I wanted that RNA in there. So I actually, when I got into like just before getting the shot, I went into a deep meditative state, and I envisioned me taking out the RNA from it and to go to my spleen and pancreas to help start repairing that.
Interesting.
So again, it's that perspective and mindset. If you go in being like, oh, fuck this shot, it's gonna be it's gonna be bad for me, all this stuff, then you're setting yourself up for that probability. Because again, your mindset will affect your body, because if you're thinking negative, your cells on like that physiological cellular level will respond to it. And that's why, right? So how your mindset is going into it is going to have a huge effect. And like, I feel that it did help. Like both of those shots, I went into a deep meditative state, and like these days I'm hitting my target range for normal blood sugar. In the last 6 weeks, I've been at least 80 to 83% in range.
Right.
So that's huge. Like, you know, going from like 60 to 70% to like jumping up to 80. You know, like obviously some of that is being more consistently working out and eating a lot healthier and stuff like that. But like, it all starts from the mindset. If you don't have that healthy mindset, you're not going to be motivated to get off the couch, do some movement. Like, and it's not even going to the fucking gym and being like, because this is I'm trying to say this without judgment, but just an observation.
Right. Observation.
And from a kinesiology aspect.
Right.
These guys that are going to the gym, building up all their upper body for strength, is actually hindering them, because our bodies are made for speed, not strength. So this is why you have a lot of these guys who are big, but then, you know, when they have to scratch their nose, they actually have to tilt their whole body because their range of motion is affected.
So thick, my neck doesn't move anymore.
Yeah. And I'm trying not to
help to scratch my nose.
Yeah. and it's unfortunate because, again, we have a society that in movies or social media and stuff like that, we're placating that you need to be big and strength, where in actuality, our body, it goes against our bodies.
Aesthetic versus function.
Yes. And I teach function, not like that appearance, because function is what's going to help you through day-to-day functionality. You know, like it's the difference between being able to go like this or like that, you know?
Yeah.
So, and it is what it is. And if they choose to, you know, be like that, cool. That's on them. But like understanding the body more and on like a deeper level is going to help you understand and connect with that body and know. Like, I would say 95% of my workouts are either doing a core, stretching, or cardio.
Mm-hmm.
Because again, the cardio is what's really helping training your body to pump the blood as effectively. Or, you know, like, so the reason why in heavy workouts you do a lot of heavy breathing, it's to get the excess CO2 in the body out.
Okay. So you're
more
cleansing,
the more that you train your body, the more your body is going to be effective to get that out and regulate itself on a more effective, efficient level.
Okay. Got it. Nice.
Yeah. And then having like the blood pump, like, so the heart can pump more blood less frequently, if that makes sense.
Okay. So you have
like instead of taking, let's say, 60 pumps a minute, or now that math is for the sake of by doing the cardio and whatnot, you can drop it down to like 50 or 40 beats.
So you can do the same amount of blood heart work
Yeah.
in
But just
less with
time.
less
Yeah.
effort. So you're only
Like the body is fascinating, and the more that like I learn about it and on a physical and physiological, so cellular level, the more you're just like, ooh, that's awesome.
yeah.
And this
Absolutely.
is where I geek out and total, like book nerd, science nerd. And this is also why Superman is my favorite superhero, because of all the science that's involved. But that's
Right. Yeah.
yeah,
They blended all that like
yeah,
planetary shifting science, cellular development, and all that stuff into a comic book. And it's like, oh, his super abilities are cool because he's flying, but they're like, yeah, but like, why?
yeah,
What about all of that stuff he's got, and what about the changes that he endured to both create like his physical abilities because he learned, and his mental sort of space? Like, what does he think being in that space on Earth, right?
yeah. So, yeah, like the body's fascinating, and again, it to me it starts with mindset, that what you think will become your reality, and will confirm that those theories or
Right,
whatever
feedback
that you
loop.
have.
Yeah.
It will like the universe will do what it can to confirm that. Whereas, we're more open, we are aware of our thoughts, that our thoughts will begin to start shifting. Like our brain is always trying to be as effective as possible with the neurosystem, like the nervous system, and setting up communication and whatnot. So, excuse me, when I first started out on this path at 27, or my second attempt, I guess,
Right.
um, that was one of the key things, is once I started working on that mindset and not giving power to those negative thoughts, your thoughts themselves begin to morph and go to a more positive right away than a negative. Because again, if you are thinking negative, your brain is going to create neural waves in order to automatically go to that right away, so then it's being more effective.
Yeah.
So it's
Yeah.
it's
So
all
like we were saying, like what you practice in your mind to allow into your mind space, like tuning a radio. If you tune into certain radio, you have presets in your car. You get in, you hit 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. You just listen to a certain radio set. You get those signals constantly.
Yep.
Only those radio stations. So you're not listening to another radio station that might tell you something different, or talk radio versus comedy versus jazz versus, you know what I mean? You're not spreading it out. You're selecting by a mental filter to
Yep.
get only these signals. So if we are protective, defensive, victim mentality, if you're any of these sort of practice protective mechanisms, those energies will constantly stand out in everything. You may be getting white light, but if you only focus on blue, that's all you're going to see.
Yeah.
Just blue light, or red in this instance, because red is the lower energy. So
Yes.
let me just red shift there a little bit. Some universality there. If anybody knows what redshift is, drop it in the comments. Let's go. If we apply these like ego and comfort zone filters to look at all of the stimuli, or I guess what's going on in the world, like energies, and we have a bias filter towards some, they're going to stand out. Like if you have a hammer, everything is a nail, sort of thing.
Yep.
So if we have these filters that function that way, if you're unaware of those filters, that's maybe what's going on in life and in energies, and what's happening practically is these filters get built up over time unconsciously if you don't take time to look at yourself and think, why is this going on? Like this practice of meditation, I guess, is where you can come to these things. But I want to inject this here and say, like, it reinforces that idea you're talking about, where our filters are what amplify this energy. It's ironic almost that we don't want them, But when we say we don't want, I've heard like this image I've had in the background here. Let me just put this up. This meditative music we've had on from like a Buddhist standpoint is if you're void of desire at all, you have the word want in both terms. Like, I want this or I don't want that. And the only thing the universe here is want. So if you say, I don't want negative, the universe is going to be like, what? You said something? Here you go.
And then the other thing to that is when there's something that we want or desire, we're also saying to God or the universe that you haven't provided enough for us. Right? Which is like, so there is a gentleman, Dr. David Hawkins. So he wrote a book called Power versus Force. And then the other book is Letting Go, the Power or the Path of Surrender.
Okay.
And he has this like it's 0 to 1,000 on a energetic level. So 1,000 being you've reached enlightenment. Desire is like less than 200. And what he's saying is like courage is 200, and that's like the starting point of getting into that positive energy. Peace is 600. Love is 500. And so so it's not about desire. Like when you say something like wording is such a key thing, and this is why we call it, when we're writing out a word, spelling. Okay, you're actually putting magic in the air because you're putting that energy and power towards those words, which is going to then go to the universe, and the universe is, okay, that's what you want, then here you go, right?
That's fascinating.
So this is why I'm very, like, if you've noticed, I didn't say I have diabetes. I say I am diagnosed with diabetes, because then again, saying that I have it is I'm owning it, and then that placates into a victim mentality.
Right.
If I say I'm diagnosed, it's more neutral.
Right.
So
it's the difference between identifying with it and speaking to it as it applies to something.
Yeah.
Right. So, like I would say that I don't know. I don't have a really good example to that, but I think I'm getting there.
I have a good example. So, with all the work that I've been doing and watching my mind, like not watching, but being aware of thoughts and stuff like that. So, I was in my Reiki 2 training, and we're talking about masculine and feminine energy, and then the teacher, she turns to me, she's like, you're supposed to be healing masculine energy. And then I'm kind of like, what? I'm here to heal feminine energy. That's what needs to be like, masculine energy? Fuck that. I hate masculine energy. Like, and then I'm like, whoa. Okay. So then starting to look at, okay, why do I hate this? And realizing that growing up, I had so many examples of toxic masculinity. My father being abusive and an alcoholic, my stepdad not healing from the past and being a control freak with my sister and I, right? So and then like a male teacher, when I open up to him about my uncle's death, and then he starts making jokes, and then you're like, okay, never mind then, right?
Yeah, so, not exactly what I need right now. Thanks,
yeah,
dude.
Yeah, you're like, you're a jackass.
That was not cool. And
yeah, so and when you're 13, that's so like informative in my life. So because of all these examples, and I said fuck that, and especially on my mom's side of the family, when I'm the only straight male out of 4 males, because both my uncles and my cousin are gay, right? That like even their energy is more feminine. So I denied that masculine part of myself. I developed more of that feminine, which is also why I would be, I don't want to say accused, but like people would project and think that I would be gay because I was more feminine. And I'm like,
Right.
no, I just grew up more feminine because fuck masculinity, right? So then from there, that's what inspired me. Like, oh fuck, I'm like, we focus so much on toxic masculinity, we don't really have ideas of positive masculinity.
Yes.
So then this is what started inspiring me. So this was going on in May, and or sorry, not May, August, and so realizing that and looking within, now I've started to work on that balance because I didn't even have that balance within between the masculine and the feminine. And ideally, you have a balance of that feminine and masculine. Part of positive masculinity is being in touch with your emotions, being able to express them in a healthy manner.
Yes.
Right. So this is why I've started. So right now the working title is Male Healers of Essex. So it's a collective here in the Windsor, Essex County area that I've gotten. So I have like psychotherapists, I have yoga masters, Reiki masters, and myself with like the mobility and mindset. And each week, so starting this coming Wednesday, is each week is one of us will do a talk. So it's from 7 p.m. to 8 p.m. And dealing with it's men healing other men, because this is one of the other issues that are in the holistic wellness community is we have females trying to heal men.
Right.
And I appreciate the effort. Right? Like I appreciate the effort, but in reality, men gotta fucking step up and start helping other men.
That is where I believe the original failure was.
Yeah.
Men of our past or men of our previous influences were the ones that dropped that ball, not as responsible or accountable for what kind of influence they were imposing. So I appreciate that obviously women have suffered because of those failures as well, but so have we, right? We need to be able to own and focus in on our own growth from men to men and hold that accountability. So I appreciate that's the one big reason why I appreciate what you're doing and the direction that you've come to, and why I've got you here today is to speak to that point, bring that awareness to other men to say, hey, we have these energies and filters to work through, and there are avenues for us to seek that are not coming from a position of victimized women as a culture or as a movement and as an energy, but other men that have also been like, hey, this is not right for me, and where do we go to support each other in that way? I think that's super important.
Oh, 100%. And I think the part, like, once we start healing that, then we'll be able to, now when we interact with the feminine, there's going to be a better balance and in that.
Interesting sort of point of view.
Yeah, sorry, I was just reading that comment.
Yeah, that's fine.
Now, okay, so Matthew, I'm not saying that masculinity is toxic by nature. What I'm trying to bring awareness to is that we keep focusing on that, but we need to start branching out and looking at masculinity as a neutral or as a positive instead of that negative, and building up. So like in my mind, positive masculinity is someone who is internally and externally like strong, like not meathead strong, but like, you know, if like, so gets into like the protector aspect, being able to be vulnerable, to show emotion, being able to communicate in an effective manner, being able to have passion in the work that you do. And this is what I feel we're not focusing on. We're focusing on oh, men are manipulative, men are like just toxic. They won't even like give specific examples. They'll just say toxic and masculinity. Right. And it's like, no. Let's get back to the basics and let's start building where we don't see masculinity as automatically toxic. And I think that is going to be a key to bridge the gap the huge fucking gap that's between the feminine and
the goddamn canyon between both sides of this debate.
We're in different solar systems at this point. I feel like
Mars and Venus, right? What is that original book? I have that book.
Yeah.
Men are from Mars, women are from Venus. I have that. What I want to focus in on here are two things. The first two words in that statement is what caught my attention first, is the expression that is in that statement. I don't want to talk about people, but I want to talk about the words that have been, as you pointed out earlier, spelled out. The words, that's funny, which is an immediate sort of like opposition to or in humor or not taken seriously.
Yeah.
Just those two words, that's funny. And down in the other statement is the things have been based on. So it focuses on where this entire idea comes from. It's being regulated by something in the world as a filter that pre-exists. So both of those things right there showcase this is being projected from a place. And what we're trying to do together today is break down where those things have been projected from.
Yeah.
We're trying to scramble that filter. So that filter that makes both of those things pop out, being it's funny that it's opposite. I don't even know why that would be funny, but I don't think it's really funny. It's just written that way. So that's an expression. And the based on thing serves the whole projection.
Yeah.
So yeah, in and of itself, I don't believe that either of the energies are negative or toxic. No. They can be, but it's the way that it's expressed that is the problem. It's a behavior or a speech pattern or an attitude that's the only thing we have access to. The energy itself is just energy.
Yeah.
How it is projected or how it's communicated can be toxic, but doesn't necessarily have to be toxic.
Yeah.
And sure, how we're looking at it, wherever our basis is from, if we're opposed to white feminine dialogue, that's developed over time. That comes from a certain place. We need to be able to understand where that message is coming from and acknowledge that that's also a projection of energy.
Oh, 100%.
So I just want to be able to break down what that statement says for the words coming from my philosophy background. I just deal with dialogue. Again, this has nothing to do with Matthew himself or people or others that may agree. I don't want to speak to that. I don't do that kind of judging people thing. I judge what I see as being presented in the world. If I get a statement, I get to look at the statement and break it down and try and figure out where that came from as an idea. Yeah. People are not their ideas, is what I want to say. We are not our ideas. We are vessels for all of it. So you don't have to be married to what you think. You can change what you think. You can change an idea. I mean, at one point, people thought the sun was in the middle, or the earth was in the middle of the solar system.
Yeah.
It took 300 years or more to figure out that idea is wrong.
Yeah.
We thought this guy was fucking crazy because of this model he put together, but it turns out that what he was saying was true. Oh my God.
I mean, so I'm gonna quote the movie Dogma here.
Okay. Yeah.
And because I love Kevin Smith movies. I think this one's still my favorite. So it's Chris Rock's character, the 13th apostle, and he goes, "It's easier to change an idea than a belief."
That's where I was speaking from, because I remember the movie.
Yeah. That's kind of what I was getting the feeling. So that's why
I was channeling my inner Rock right then. But I didn't want to quote him directly, because then it would sound like I'm just mouthing the movie.
Well, I did it for you, so you're
Gotcha.
welcome. Yeah. But like I loved, like, when I watched that movie when I was 16, like that, I'm almost 40. Like, that still has stayed with me on not getting bogged down by beliefs, because again, that limits and keeps you in that ball of what you know.
Yeah.
And when you have an idea of things, and it's kind of got me, not, I don't want to say in trouble, but like my Reiki master, she's like, be more convicted, like, what you're saying is true. Don't. And I'm just like, hey, it could be true for me and you, but it might not be true for someone else. And if someone presents something that seems a little more logical or whatever than what I'm thinking, by having the idea of it, it's easier to be like, okay, so that idea needs to be a little, shifted. Cool. Instead of like a whole belief, and then you are so stuck in that belief that you end up killing people. Religions. But like, yeah, like, and this is,
It's just, it is, and that, but that is true. That's factual. That's factually true of our history as human beings. That is what happens.
yeah,
There is a belief, a common belief, a group of belief, and then a motivation based on the belief to an activity that results in an action.
yeah,
That is factually true of what people have been like as a behavior.
yeah,
So that's not opinion here. That's fact.
yeah.
So that's proof that can be extremely dangerous.
Well, right? And I think, like, but I feel people are starting to realize this, because, like, if you look at every major religion, it has the same fucking story. The only difference is the names. And it's
the
like,
names
hey,
or the characters, yeah.
yeah.
To a
And I'm
certain,
just like, so
to certain degrees, sure.
we're
But the
really going to get
fundamentals
bogged
are all
down by
based.
like specific details. Like, if you guys look at, you guys kind of believe in the same thing. You just,
Yeah, and I don't want to get too far into that because of how strong those beliefs are. I mean,
Yeah.
obviously we just discussed what happens when those beliefs get like flatlined straight out to a point.
Yeah.
I don't want to be strung up because of what I'm talking about. They're just words.
Yep.
These are just ideas. And for the sake of examining them, like anything else, in order to understand anything fully, you must examine it. And if you examine it all thoroughly, you have to include as much of it as possible. So I want to be able to just draw the difference between speaking to a point and analyzing things. Like, I am not speaking a belief against or opposed. I'm speaking about all of it like you would dissecting anything. You open it all up to see what's going on, and then you can figure out what makes it work.
Yeah. Sorry, I just the inner me wants to change the wording a little bit. It's not must. In an ideal world, you're looking at it. It's not that you have to or you must do it, because then again, that's coming from a place of force instead of a place of flow. And you want to come from a place of flow because it's going to be more organic and healthier, not put up bridges when you're like, eat this or whatever, right? So just, sorry. Yeah.
Yeah, I know. I want to be able to keep that light because it can be very easily misinterpreted that once something is said, and like I approach the previous sort of thing, and here it's acknowledging the same thing, is that our communication sets up the foundation for the next step. And so quickly with text, and I'm used to this and advocate it all the time, that the way we're speaking here, where you can read my body language and you can acknowledge a lot more of what I'm talking about. If I say it with a smile, with a sneer, with small eyes, with, you know what I mean? It can be so lost in translation between one expression. Here we have a good example. So it's great that this is kind of turned around. that we have text on screen that we are not listening to. We are not watching somebody speak. And human beings, for the longest times in our lives, except until like the last 30 years, 40 years maybe, I forget how old I am, the only thing that we used to do is interact basically in person. Like I used to go and knock on my friend's door to see if they're home. I couldn't even you could call them for quite a while. We've had phones, but like you couldn't text, you couldn't even, you know what I mean? So we have lost a lot of our human interaction, which has set up an entire young generation with very, very loud mouths that fuel what is going into the perspective that is online right now. This generation that doesn't even remember what it's like to not know if somebody's home or not and have to go there to find out.
Yeah.
Like they don't know. That's not part of their experience.
No.
They text and get a message, and they have more of a functioning relationship with their device than they do with the person on the other end. That's incredibly dysfunctional. And I wanted to be able to take what just happened in an open human way and say, yeah, and this is exactly true. But it's like people don't facilitate this tool. They have a secure functional bubble. And I know people who are so against technology, they won't learn anything new. Like, that sounds too complicated. I'm like, okay, well, when that ship sails and I'm over on the other side, don't expect to get a hold of me because I'm keeping up. Like, I don't want to be outside of this functioning, healthy relationship building tool.
Yeah.
Right. And that's an amazing point that emojis, the first part of EMO stands for emotion. And when you can't express emotion articulately in text, you need to use pictures. I mean, shit, the Egyptians got that right. How old is that? How old are hieroglyphics? If they could figure that out back then, in 2022 with your smartphone, don't let the device outsmart you.
Well, I mean, it's almost full circle, like how we started with hieroglyphics and pictures, and then now,
right?
We learned language, we altered it a little bit, and then now we're going back to pictures.
Back to pictures again.
Story. Like, and yeah, like I was joking with a friend of mine actually a couple days ago, and I'm like, what would be awesome is if we had a tone app, right? So let's say you want to sound sophisticated and whatnot. You might have like a Sean Connery voice.
Right.
If you want to be like smooth and romantic, maybe a Morgan Freeman voice. Now, again, I'm only talking for like the male perspective, you want to be funny and quirky, maybe, for a female, use Tina Fey or something like that, right? But like you use these different voices to like help read out the text.
Yeah.
So that you can get a better understanding of the tone, because like tone is so lost in text.
It is to a degree, and I have something to add to that.
And like, so Matthew, like I'm glad that you're putting comments in and getting involved with the conversation, and I appreciate that, because like
I'm super glad that he's here, and Matthew's always been a really sort of active sort of subscriber and friend within the community, so I truly appreciate the feedback here. It's valuable.
Yeah. So
what I was going to say about tone is I'm not much of a reader, despite what my educational background is. Let me tell a bit of this story. Now, a lot of people may not know this either, that I had been diagnosed with dyslexia in my grade 3 sort of timeline. I was having difficulty processing and following along with the mandate or the agenda in schools, and my ability to follow that schedule was slow. So they did this sort of thing. They said, okay, well, it's probably dyslexia. This is what's going on, because I displayed all these kinds of things. So I had an accelerated sort of special learning English and focus class from grade 3 right through to high school. So because of that, I was really focused on writing more, reading more, understanding the different ways to structure words, the way that they interact, which is why I'm very wordy in here. And it propelled me into philosophy because the meanings and structures behind our words carry significance. Like the argumentation format matters, how things are presented matter, the meaning of each word, the syntax matters. It made me more and more fascinated with the ability to use words in a written form to communicate a meaning. And despite my difficulty, I went into the philosophy side of it and read and read and wrote and like all that stuff. But to this point where we don't have tone, if you've ever read a novel and you had to follow that story and read and understand character development, those writers are trained to write tone. So there's different tonalities in the way that like signage is written.
Mm-hmm.
Like it's a difference between saying, I don't want you to come in here, and do not enter. Do not enter is a tone from like God said so.
Yeah.
The other one saying, I don't want you to come in, which is like a personified. That's writing tone into what you're saying. Even though like a lot of people have to take English and they learn what they're doing in school and you pass these basic, that's not the end of it. That's not, and that's where it's failing now. You can see it where I don't know what the education rates are like now. I know that schools are kind of messed up at the time, but like this tonality in writing form is so rare that people have like commented on the way I write as being like better, or it reads really well. And I'm thinking, really? Are like me? Like I don't see that at all. I mean, I pay attention and know how that kind of functions, but I mean, is it that rare now that my basic level dyslexic background writing is coming out as being like heightened? I'm like, I don't get that at all. But I just wanted to make that point that how we communicate our text carries a tone whether we know it or not. And that's kind of what happens in this miscommunication era right now, where it's void of emojis. It's not communicated well, and the tone is what people will respond to. I've been told this when I say things, because I will speak very like exact and cold and read like a text manual, and like I'm reading, like technical specifications of a computer, and I'm not acknowledging the human emotion of what's going on. I'm like, yeah, because information is really important. You can take the information and move on.
Yeah,
we'll deal with the tone later. Like if you have emotions about it, set that aside. I often can't do both at the same time sometimes. But this is why I focus so hard on trying to communicate a tone with text, because in text form, you can lose it so easily.
Oh, yeah.
You respond to how it feels rather than what's written down. And that's where a lot of these fights will happen. I wanted to ask, I think we mentioned this before, I wanted to start a poll. How often in the spread of communication do you get into a fight? Is it in person? Is it in text? Is it in comment sections? Or is it in emails? Like, where do you most often get into an interpersonal relationship or whatever, miscommunication or fight? Where does it happen most? And I can bet you, like you said, probably comment sections.
yeah.
For two reasons. One, people probably write like they're void of a lot of things and they're not using emotion. They're just not. They're talking to a stranger with text that's void of any feeling at all.
Oh man, the amount of times I would post something, someone comments on the and doing personal attacks, and I just like, one of my favorite classes that I've taken at the universities. So people that don't know, I'm in 4th year at the University of Windsor for human kinetics. I'm doing a double minor in philosophy and psychology. So one of the philosophy courses that I took was called reasoning skills. And holy fuck, did that ever help dealing with comments?
Me
Because
too.
I would get right into the heat of it and be like, "Brr, brr, 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 brr." And then after taking that, I'm like, no. So I don't attack personally. I just, okay, this is like the facts that I have. This is the just or my opinion of what's going on and stuff like that. I don't attack. I just keep, and it kind of pisses people off because then they keep attacking, and I'm like, and then I call them out on it, and I'm like, hey, do you see me attacking? No, I'm just giving facts and like knowledge to further like the knowledge. Yeah, sorry, I didn't mean to use knowledge twice there, but like,
No, that's okay.
we'll move past that. And so yeah, and it's just like I used to get so heated and pissed off, and then there's times where like I'll have my stepdad, man, I
It's
can't believe
this.
you didn't like go off on him, and I'm like, yeah, but that's not me anymore. Like I'm not gonna give that power just because of wherever state of consciousness that person is. Doesn't mean that I'm gonna go down and like lower my vibration for them, because
Right.
then they might beat me with experience, and then it harms me because I allowed them, like I essentially give them power
Right.
over me,
Right. Yeah,
and then
you're taking the bait and taking
yeah,
on whatever energies that they've presented rather than giving yourself like 2 seconds or analyzing in a different kind of way, which is why I've put this up on screen. That's a
yeah,
class that I have too. I have 3 books on it, including I did ethical theory, moral theory, like theology, like I did all of it. I focused really hard on philosophy. So
yeah,
this one thing is the one thing that isn't taught or not really expressed in trying to communicate effectively. And why I get taken like, oh, that's not emotional. I'm like, well, it's because I'm analyzing what's being presented. The information being presented in the words is what I'm focusing on, to the point where like maybe I do miss the point. Sometimes like maybe like my emotional intelligence or whatnot is a little skewed, or not practiced. I have focused on the data or the information side as a comfort or as an awareness, and the emotional sort of where is the text coming from as a person? What is the other layer of what they're saying? So you have the text information. What's the emotional information being conveyed here that I might not get. I might not be good at understanding.
yeah. And I mean, it also gets into like, you know, ego may want to put in that emotion
Right. Or
so that
may not want to put it in. You're like,
yeah, like I mean, it depends on the situation. Sorry, I'm reading.
yep, talk more communication.
Oh yeah,
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 exactly. And that there has been a huge, 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 huge like downstep or downgrade in this, where a lot of it now is like what? It's just kids talking with other kids.
yeah,
Like they don't connect with teachers. They don't connect with people that have these developed skills from 30, 60 years ago.
yeah,
And the communication like between even kids and parents is broken now. Or like I text with my mom a lot now. I'm not really in conversation with her that much. It's mostly text because she's far away, and we have to kind of do these things. We have to communicate differently. But I mean, I'm glad that I have you on video because it brings that other level back. So I want to be able to do this more.
yep,
So it's talk, tone, body language, which is the 80% of what we understand. We can pick up on the movements more than we can like the tone in text.
yeah,
We're being robbed of that communication. And that's a good point that Matthew's brought up, that it's not being taught that much. It's not being focused on. And like I said, even like the general curriculum, even when I was in school, I had extra help to get to this other level of recognizing what writing can do with tone, with meaning, with structure.
yeah,
I had to get taught all the way through college and university to get to a point where it stands out. But it's effective, or when I apply it. I don't always apply it.
yeah. But
Sometimes it's all just gibberish.
it happens to the best of us, and
Yeah.
as third dimensional meat suits. We're not always perfect, so, and we're not supposed to be on this plane. Like,
Yeah.
we're supposed to be fucking up left, right, and center, and then learning learning the lessons after.
Yeah, we're here in this three-dimensional meat suit to collect a ticket for access to the next plane.
Yeah. Yeah.
If you don't, it's like if you don't figure out how to get that ticket, guess what? You get ground up and spit back into the same three-dimensional meat suit, and you don't have any idea what happened before. But like, try again, asshole. It's like
Yeah.
getting Tim Hortons coffee and rolling up that lid, and it just says, "Try again, try
Yeah.
again, try again."
Oh, yeah. Until you're like, oh, I finally got the ticket. It's the golden ticket.
Yeah, exactly. Willy Wonka can cover me in chocolate. Let's go, man.
Yeah.
I just want the ticket. I just mean to, like, I want to make it funny. I want to bring humor to this too, because maybe it is sensitive. Maybe this conversation about being accountable, being self-aware, being like facing your past, acknowledging the things that have guided you to a certain point and view the world. Like, that might be a painful door to open. But what we're trying to say here also is that facing that corrects the tuning frequency of your mind, and you can bring in more healthy like directions afterwards on the other side. You have to endure a little bit, the same way like lifting weights is painful, or running and you're out of breath is painful. The more you do it, the more you practice, you will get easier, and it will open up more opportunities on the other side. So I want to encourage people to, like, not meditate, whatever word you want to use that gets you in that mode, is just be self-aware. Try to find that self-awareness to get these points of filter, or self-protection, or ego, or tuning, whatever, again, another word to describe a state of energy, and then reach beyond that to something else.
Oh yeah. And I mean, like, for me, I'm at the point where I'm like, I kind of have fun with it. I'm like, okay, so we got this situation. Let's, like, I start having fun with it. And it helps because, like, it's how, like, having that stagnant, like, also just communicating it, like, you're more engaging if you make some jokes here and there, and people are going to be more willing to listen, because again, it comes from a place of flow instead of a place of force. And like, yeah, it's, like, I remember, first starting out, be like, oh fuck, not this shit again. Now I'm like, okay, well, let's see what I have to do in order to, like, help flip this and stuff like that. So I mean, it's been a fucking learning process. I'm still going through it. I mean, I feel I'm doing a lot better. Like, the one thing that has helped is, letting go of the anger that allowed myself to be fueled from, and realizing the toxicity of it because of how I was using it. Now, like, yeah, I can still get angry, but then it's like, okay, why am I getting angry? Where is this anger coming from? What is it triggering? And then it's like, it's almost like a Where's Waldo of, like, finding out what's your triggers and stuff like that, I'm like, oh,
sound like Batman. You just, like, show up in a Where's Waldo outfit, or a detective, and be like, where are the triggers?
I'm the trigger man.
Oh my God! Everybody's gonna have their own, like, inner Bane dialogue.
Yeah. What's going to break first, your mind or your body?
That's such a. It's hilarious that I brought that dialogue into this, because, like, that conversation from Bane being like, it's funny, like, we're all in masks now, It's almost like all the children born in the last 2 years were born into darkness.
Yeah.
So everything is like manifesting around that conversation, and he being this mass tortured person that, you know, came from a certain place wondering about Batman, also tortured and dark and suffering. It's like, what is going to break first, your mind or your body? It goes back to like earlier point in the conversation we talked about being challenged by our human reality, like being diagnosed with something, facing real moral, not like, or facing real mortality, and making decisions against that final, finite, absolute, inevitable end. When it starts to ring that bell, you're like, do I act now? That's your body at, you know, your body is going to give up on you first, and your mind will react when your body is threatened. And it's odd how it requires that trigger before it kicks its own ass. Like your mind needs the body to be threatened as a finite, rather than the mind creating a finite and moving on its own.
Right? And I mean, this
taking that finite end rather than its own starting point. Be like, I need to decide in my mind that this is where the starting point is, and I go from here in your mind without requiring that imminent threat.
It's just 100%.
It's just interesting that that's what's going on there.
And I feel like, I mean, part of the reason why we're down here on third dimension Earth is to feel that physicality of things and give it a different perspective than just always being in the mind. The body physically reacts to these emotions and to these experiences and stuff like that, right? So and if, like you said earlier, you know, the body can be like an antenna, you know.
We need to be more like this guy. The sort of state of balance. We have this like left and right energy. Everything is in flow. Everything is in a balanced focus. Like we can see both sides. Both sides matter, and we can draw from any of the energy available to make like this forward progress towards this other end. Maybe can we choose the end? I wonder. Is that something of a possibility? Can we do that?
So I think the probability is there, and so it's almost like, so think of it. Let's think of it as a video game, right? Like, so before you come down and your soul enters this meat suit, you're like, okay, I'm gonna be this ethnic group. I'm gonna be this gender. I'm gonna have to work through this, and this struggle. Those are like my three main objectives to work through. And I'm gonna die in this sort of way. And they're like, okay, everything's uploaded down there. And then you come down, and then because like, so I love using this analogy. I feel part of the reason why we don't remember the stuff that's in between lifetimes is because, so when you go up the scale of dimensions, you learn more experience, right? But like when you come down, you're going to lose something. So perfect example is like you and I individually are we're third dimensions, right? But right now on the computer screen, we're only two dimensional. So we're losing some of that information.
Right.
So it's the same thing, is that we can't bring that information down with us here. So that's why there's this disconnect and a society filled with like amnesia, because we don't really remember. And then we get into like, you know, when you're a baby and a little kid, you still remember some of that stuff. But then we get conditioned by earth society and patterns and stuff like that, then we lose. And especially where we are as a society, we're so disconnected from nature and whatnot that we're losing that information more and more as we grow older. So the more that, you know, we're aware of that, the more that we're like, oh, we're open to more of the possibility of what is out there.
Right.
And yeah, I mean, at the same time, the veils between the dimensions are starting to get a little blurry. And this next statement is a little unconventional. So we'll see how, but it's been received really well. So anyone that I've said it to. So this idea of transgendered going on right now, my personal belief is that it's these people are connecting to past lives. They might not have a strong spiritual connection, and if one of their, let's say, last 3 past lives was the opposite gender, they could be feeling that, which is why they feel, oh, I actually should be this. But in actuality, when they came down here, or just before they came down here, they decided to be what they were. But there's a disconnect that if they're not as spiritual, they might not realize, oh, that could be a past life that I'm feeling and not necessarily what I currently am.
Right.
So then you're getting this big movement of, oh, I actually feel I'm the opposite sex than what I am, because they're connecting to their past lives without knowing that it's their past lives.
Interesting. I hadn't really heard that expressed that way. I guess that makes sense, because I mean, I don't honestly, my expression here, the best thing that I've related to is the idea of spectrum.
Yep.
The same thing of like mental, as like mental faculties. You go from, I don't know, I want to say like an IQ scale or whatever you want to call the mental space in terms of a spectrum. That's where I feel like maybe I fit, but where this taught, yeah, exactly. Yeah, I mean, we are temporarily embodied. That's kind of the idea. But like some of these,
that's awesome. Sorry.
Yeah.
Thank you, Matt, for that. Yeah, like I think that there's a huge thing to that as well, that we're not, like, we can't really learn the lessons if we know what the lesson's supposed to be, right? Like, that's the exact thing of like, you're studying for your final exam and then you're given the answers to the final exam. Well, then you're not really learning anything because you're just regurgitating. So you make a huge point, a huge valid point on that, Matthew. So thank you for bringing that up.
Yeah. It's interesting, just in a human devoid of any other types of description, like where, you know, that idea of like consciousness, which no one can explain. Where does that kind of function come from? It's not, you can't explain it in materialism. You can't explain it entirely. In spiritualism, you're taking a leap, like in science does, but they base as much as they can on evidence to a point, and then they theorize using the same methods. So in spirituality, you have to say like, oh, you can make that leap between where our consciousness comes from as it is, because it's more than the sum of its parts. It can't be explained materialized. So we say that our human body is a vessel for a higher energy. I think that's how it's expressed. I mean, so how you get here is not a choice. Like you just said, in a video game, like Jumanji, for instance, that movie Jumanji embodies exactly what you just said in terms of like choosing your character and your race and your weaknesses and your strengths, and you have an objective that's part of the game you get loaded into. You have to go from this point to this point. If you do anything in between, you get killed. You only get so many chances, and then that's it. It really functions exactly that way. So like when you are uploaded, or I should say downloaded to Earth, you show up with a body you didn't choose, an environment you didn't choose, parents you didn't choose, a race you didn't choose, and you're immediately inundated with environmental factors that set all of your early understandings, your language, your mobility, your preferences. You get immediately surrounded by environmental factors that set the stage.
Yep.
Build your filters, set your preferences, what you eat. The habits of things are environmental cues. Now we could fight that, or we can embrace it, and then you see all kinds of every variation of human being. I just said human being. I'm not even going to go into that next topic, but just as a human being, you have all of these different choices and environmental factors. All of those factors are going to cause a mental and probably physical difference in how that human being expresses its existence here. So when it comes to these choices, I think that the debate in all of it could be some of what you're talking about, could be residual energies and tuning into those things. Some of it could just be environmental cues and political. Some of the toxicity we were talking about earlier in male expression in society could be some of these like internal dialogues. Maybe they don't feel comfortable in their own skin because they're somewhere in this expressive scale, and it doesn't fit the norm. It doesn't fit a majority. It doesn't fit politically. So they have to fight against being themselves in a world that doesn't want to accept their expression. That's internally frustrating. I could tell you, because I'm fucking weird, but I got over people caring.
Yeah.
I just do whatever I want to do and say whatever I have to say, despite what anybody has to judge. But before this, in my youth, I would have long hair. I would have fake nails. I would wear makeup. I still have skirts. I have a lot of different fashionable differences in this world, and expressed that when I was in high school, but nobody was supportive. It wasn't even a topic then. It's only until recently that there's been enough voices and enough people acknowledging a spectrum that more and more people from either the past, Caitlin, bless her heart, have come out and changed because there's an opening for this type of expression as a human being in a place where most of what we're facing, we didn't choose. So it's like you're given a political and social economic sort of choice. Now you can express this and not feel like you're going to get lynched or hung up or burned as a witch. Like the environment has changed for these expressions to be possible.
Yeah.
So it's not like just being human is hard enough. Never mind being a different human that most others don't want to even deal with.
Yeah.
That's a tough one.
As someone who has lived that a lot of my life, yeah. But now I'm like, well, I'm just going to be me. I'm not going to be harmful to myself or to others. And I'm going to keep doing me. And if you don't accept that, then cool. You don't accept it. But don't fucking judge me for it, because I'm not putting that judgment on you.
Right.
You do you. Let me do me. Like, and let's make sure we're not killing each other. Like,
right. You're not holding
it seems so simple, but like, holy fuck.
Yeah. Yeah, there's a lot of judgment and a lot of filters that get put against something that is different or deemed as unacceptable, and that kind of thing. And not everybody's ready to hear it. That's part of that journey. They're just not ready to hear it, so they don't listen. Like we started the conversation with earlier today, 2 hours ago now, which is telling me that we should probably come to an end here pretty soon. That like if we are not open to listening to the other side of that discussion, then we're not getting the whole of information. Our decisions are going to be self-biased and comforted, and that kind of thing. We're denying access to another level if we're not ready to listen. So we need to be able to listen and understand what's going on the other side, instead of being defensive or protective or isolated from another level.
And also on how you communicate, because how you communicate this in these conversations is also going to have like how that other person is going to accept it.
Right.
So like, if we keep this kind of tone where it's like more opening and inviting to that conversation, you're gonna get a better response than on like, yeah, well, we need to fucking change and all this stuff. And like, if you're not doing what you're supposed to be doing, then you're dead to me. I'm not a crook. Sorry. I don't know why I went in my Nixon voice there. Let's just negate that a little bit.
That's everybody's choice, like that's what people feel. That's what they have to say. That's where they are with life. That some people have come along to be accepting and some people are just not ready. So I don't hold them. I mean, I guess in a practical way, I do hold them accountable for what they're presenting, because when they project something into the world, that's your action, that's your behavior. You have to deal with what you present to the world. If this is what you're saying, that you are either ready or not ready, then you get treated that way. Yeah. Like, I want to be treated well, so I treat others based on what they present. If they present with, I'm not ready, I'm not listening, I don't want this, then you don't get it. I don't enforce that on you. I don't force that on people that don't want it. You have the freedom of expression, and I accept what you're expressing. I want that back.
Yeah.
Right? That's the golden rule. I want to be accepted for what's going on. You don't have to agree, but you don't have to attack me either.
Well, yeah, right.
Like, that's the divided line, is if you don't agree, you don't have to attack. It's not about that.
Yeah.
You can defend by being quiet and going away. That's fine. That is your right. That is an expression. That's an attitude. There's not anything being forced here. If you're not ready, you're not open, not willing, then that's fine. Not everybody is going to be at these same levels of waking up or accepting, you know what I mean? But I think to the point we wanted to bring throughout this is that these things are going on a lot of the time as unconscious, but they affect what we're doing in the world. They are filters that are unconscious, whether we like it or not, and they're applied to how we communicate, to the messages or beliefs or energies, and they do have an effect on the world that surrounds us. So if we're more aware and we open up and we have these conversations, maybe that dial can turn a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
And hopefully when it turns, it's beneficial. Yep. That's basically all that I wanted to bring from this. And, with your guidance here and bringing these topics up, it's great that we have some sort of direction to look at or topics to look to. And I hope I'm going to go through it and maybe link everything in the description or in chat. If people want to reach out, then they can reach out to either one of us. I'll link some of the stuff in the description to the video, and we can explore this another time. So congratulations also on getting the show started. Hopefully all of that stuff goes well. Your weekly sort of thing. If people want to tune in, I'll link to that as well.
Yep.
And maybe we'll revisit this in a while. Maybe when it's warm, we can do this outside.
Ooh, that'd be nice. Yeah.
Right?
I'll sit outside in the back. Like, my backyard is so nice because it has like so much greenery and stuff like that. So like, it'd be a lot fitting. Yeah, I think you summed that up beautifully of what we're touching base on. And I appreciate the ability to start talking about this. I feel like I'm at that point where I've learned enough that if I can start sharing even one or two things that people pick up on, amazing. Like, it's I think a lot of us are in that we're agreeing that change needs to start happening, and I am doing my best to be a positive in the world, and yeah, so thank you for allowing me to speak some things, some philosophies and whatnot. And yeah, I appreciate it and look forward to coming back on and doing this again.
Yeah, I'll host these as much as I can, or as much as we have anything interesting or new to say or new topic. It doesn't even have to be as like focused.
Yep.
I just like being able to hang out and present this like new kind of way and interacting. So I also want to extend a thank you to the guys that were in the chat today live. That's also
Yes.
very helpful. It does shed some light and feedback on what's going on here. And that's what this is about. I want to say that like we are not presenting only one way of living. We're not saying this is the right way to live. We are saying this is where we are as humans. We want to share live with the world or with whomever's watching what we have thought about. And we thank you for listening, whether you like it or not, or whether it's helpful or not. The feedback and the interaction is really important because that's us as humans. It's social. Social is interactive. And the interaction is very important.
Yeah.
So I want to extend that thanks to anybody who's watches this even afterwards. If you're watching this afterwards and you're not live, feel free to say whatever you want, please. That's what this is all about. We want to generate an energy exchange. None of this works if we're solo and silent.
Yep.
None of it makes any sense and doesn't work at all if you're by yourself or solo and silent. You need to be able to communicate and express, and that's where we're focused on these things. Cool. Yeah, so hang out for a bit. I'll end the stream. It's everybody else. See you guys next time. And yeah, that's 2 hours and 10 minutes of our lives expressed in energy and betterment and wellness. Thank you.
Yeah.
I'll see you guys later next time. I'll present something. I'll try to get everything in the links. So yeah, until then.